Welcome to Strain on the Game, the podcast that reveals what it really takes to keep elite footballers performing at the highest level. I'm Stephen Warnock, former Premier League player, joined by physical performance expert Adrian Lamb. From training ground truths to the financial impact of fitness, we discuss the often overlooked challenges behind the beautiful game. In this week's episode, we're talking about pre-season and what the setup really looks like behind the scenes. Follow us on social media and YouTube at Strain on the Game. Subscribe, like, and follow. Okay, so here we are for a Strain on the Game, and this podcast was a podcast thought up on a night out in Santa Monica. However, our relationship stems back a little bit further than that. So if we want to give the listeners and the viewers a little bit of history, Lammy, do you want to do it?
Yeah, December the 8th, 2008 was the date that I first met you. I remember the date that I first met you. I just got a fantastic memory because you've left such an impact on my life. Positive impact for the most part. That it's just ingrained on my memory. That was the date that I joined Blackburn Rovers, which was where you were at a time when we first came together. And then so
Paul
that was
Ince, was Paul Ince manager?
Correct. Yeah. So I couldn't say that I was instrumental in his dismissal, but I joined Blackburn on the Monday. We played Wigan on the Saturday. He was dismissed on the Sunday. It's like it's getting to be a Craig David song, this. And then Sam Allardyce came in on the Tuesday, and then that was reacquainting myself with Sam, who I'd worked with previously at Newcastle United, which is where I started my career. And then that was us on the road together for a while, wasn't it?
Yeah, because then we worked together for a bit at Blackburn, and then I joined Villa the season after, or was it the summer? I can't actually remember.
You did the full season the rest of that half season with Sam,
and then the full season after.
And the full season after. Then I think you started the pre-season with us the season after that.
That's right.
Then you moved to Villa, which I mean, I don't think that I didn't take that personally. I didn't think that was anything to do with me. The reason you left. But the look of disappointment on your face a year later when I turned up to Aston Villa to reacquaint, let's get the team, let's get the band back together, Warnie.
I was delighted, absolutely made up.
I said, I wanted to reacquaint myself with one of the best fullbacks that I've ever worked with, and fortunately,
I wasn't the only player you'd worked with, was I?
It was. You kind of ruined the punchline then because it was going to be Habib Bey. Habib was somebody I worked with previously at Newcastle, and I enjoyed working with Habib to a greater extent than I enjoyed working with you. But I still enjoyed working with you. You were not exactly a fitness coach's dream, but you weren't exactly a fitness coach's nightmare either. So that was
thanks for that, mate.
Positive.
I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. Yeah, so we've stayed in touch ever since, haven't we? We've been sort of. I went on holiday to Santa Monica, where you now live.
It was the usual kind of 1 year text from your good self. I'm in Santa Monica. What are you doing? And would you fancy a coffee? And a coffee turned into something a little bit more exotic than a coffee. And as we always do, we got reminiscing about our time together and football in general and how and then I think you probably phoned me a week afterwards and said, that conversation we had, that's a podcast.
The big thing that I had in my head, and then obviously when it was discussing it with you, was to give people information that they probably don't know enough about, as in what actually goes on behind the scenes and what it actually takes to have fitness in football and what a fitness coach actually does. Today's episode, we're lifting the lid on pre-season and what it actually demands, why it really matters, and how can it make or break a season. So let's delve into it. Okay, so from your point of view, what is the setup to a pre-season, and when do you actually start planning for a pre-season as a fitness coach?
That's the process begins probably 2 weeks before the end of the season in terms of identifying venues that you're going to go to, doing site visits, trying to put the logistical structure in place around the pre-season. That can be difficult sometimes because it's dependent upon budgets, and that in turn can be dependent on league positions. So if you think back to our time at Blackburn, there were times that we couldn't really finalise where we were going to go for pre-season because we hadn't guaranteed our Premier League survival at that point, and that was going to affect the amount of money that was available for us to spend on pre-season. So we would have kind of a plan A, a plan B, or a plan C based around that. Obviously, different venues would come at a different cost, and we would try to expose the players to as high a quality training facility as we possibly could, because typically we would go away. The reason that we would go away, first of all, often for logistical reasons, in that if you cast your mind back, the pitches weren't often ready. So you would go back to your training as soon as the last day of the final training session of the last day of the season is finished. Then you've got these ground specialists coming in, they're tearing up the training pitches, and they're laying down new pitches. That takes time for them to be ready, and often they weren't, or there weren't enough of them ready for us to support the amount of training that we wanted to do. So that was the first thing. The second thing was, we're going to be in that training ground from now until the middle of May, and it's a long time to be in that environment. So a change of scenery is a good thing. And then the third reason is, when we've got everybody in one place all the time, we're training 3 times a day. We don't have that problem. Everybody's in one place. We don't have the problem with players going home. Where are they traveling to? Players often don't live close to the training ground. They could live an hour and a half, 2 hours away in some cases. So if you're doing 3 training sessions a day, you need the players to have somewhere to go to get their head down in the afternoon. And also we've got then the opportunity to lay down some protocols that we're going to do through the year. So coaches can have meetings with the players in the afternoons and the evenings because the players are there and they're available. So it facilitates more contact time between coaches and players. And it allows us to establish, from my perspective as a fitness coach, it allowed me to if I wanted to introduce something into the team, asking players to do a particular test before training, whatever it might, a hydration test or a flexibility test, that can be difficult to do halfway through the season. Yeah. So by establishing these protocols, why are we doing this now? Why, there's always questions. But when you're doing it in a pre-season camp, it's standardized and it becomes a normal part of everyday training. And then once that behavior becomes adopted, again, you can take it back.
So I used to enjoy going away on the camp, purely because you knew how hard it was going to be, how tough every single session was. There, like you're saying, there 3 sessions a day. For people who don't understand, you'd probably do a running session before breakfast. You would then come in, have your breakfast, then you go out and do a little bit of grass work, and after breakfast, a little bit later on. And then you look at doing an evening session round about 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and then eat food after it. And I always used to think, if you were away in the training ground doing that, there was no time to sleep. There was nowhere to go and get recovery or to have a bit of time on your own to find that space. You do need sleep. If you were driving home and then you had to drive back, a lot of players would live around about 30 minutes to an hour away, roughly. So you didn't have that time to do that. But I think by going going away for a period of time, you just knew that you could recover in between, and you could get the massage, you could get that physio's perspective of things, or if you needed little tweaks here and there to work with people, you had that time to do that. So I actually enjoyed that period of going away, knowing that fully committed to it and fully embedded in what was being asked of you, and making sure that you could throw yourself into it 100%, rather than being, oh, like, maybe if you've got kids and it's like one of the kids is screaming the house down and you're not sleeping well during the night, or you've just had a bad sleep for some reason, someone's up in the house or whatever. You just don't get that comfort of knowing I'm going to have a good night's sleep, or I'm going to have a
There were
rest
no
during the day.
distractions. There's no distraction. One of the things that I thought was really important for that first trip, and you'd be able to answer this, was when we had new signings and they were coming into the team, it allowed us an opportunity to embed them into the philosophy of the group, if you like, or the way we wanted to play. This is the way we do things here, you know.
I think that's hugely important, though, isn't it? I think that's one of the things when you look at players now and they join up, it's you want to make connections straight away to the people that you're going to be teammates with, almost find out what the pros and cons are of that person, what they like, what they don't like. And that's a huge part. I often look at clubs now and think, why do you do business so late in the transfer window? You're losing so much within that first month of preseason, where the initiations, the nights out where you will sort of let loose a little bit and have a good night or a good day, whatever it might be, where the manager says, right, a team bonding session, you find out things about players that you just think, wow, I didn't know that about this person. And it opens different sorts of traits in a personality, which is so important. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, which was, I used to enjoy this whenever preseason popped up and we were like, where are we going? So some of my favorite trips were going to sort of far and away places that I probably wouldn't go on holiday, or certain places where you'd visit and you think, I wouldn't really go here, but I'm quite excited to have a look at it. From a fitness point of view, or a fitness coach's point of view, when you used to see America pop up or the Far East, what was your thoughts? Because for me, it was great. I used to think I'm going to somewhere new. But from your point of view, is it completely different? When the commercial, it's what?
It's a fucking disaster.
Go on, why? Because and I say this purely because if you look at things now, Manchester United are off to America, Everton are off to America, Bournemouth. I think Liverpool are going to Hong Kong, and then you've got other teams flying out to the Far East. And obviously this is hugely commercially beneficial to them. But from your point of view,
I get it, right? This was my thing, right? If you're Manchester City, if you're Liverpool, if you're Manchester United, if you're Arsenal, and you are, you're a global brand.
Yeah.
Brand, right? And you do have fans all over the world, and all right, Manchester United fans don't just exist in Salford, they exist in Los Angeles and Hong Kong and all over the world. So they get, when do they get to see? I get that, right? If you're Blackburn Rovers, right, and you're going to a meeting for pre-season and your job is to stay in the Premier League, why are we going to Australia for a commercial thing? Is suddenly we're going to build this massive fan base in Australia? Because, and this is where I would argue that sometimes we put the cart before the horse, right? Because how much money, if we're talking about money and commercial, I get it with the big clubs, but the smaller clubs, if you like. And by the way, go on record, I love Blackburn. I still love Blackburn. This is in no way me knocking Blackburn Rovers or the fan base or anything like that. But
bit of common sense.
You've the previous pre-season, right? So we created this model of pre-season where we were trying to minimize travel to maximize contact time with the players, time on the grass, minimize disruption in terms of jet lag and circadian rhythm disruption in terms of you're out of sync, and we wanted no more than a 2-hour kind of
difference.
Time difference, yeah, exactly. and we did that, and it was like the model perfect preseason. We went away to Austria. We had a brilliant camp in Austria where we pushed you guys to the edge. We felt there was no game involved in that. We came back. We had a couple of friendlies. We flew out to northern Italy, wasn't it? And we played Roma, and then we
Yeah.
flew to Croatia, and we
Great night out
played
after that. Great night out after
Zagreb,
that.
and then we had a spectacular piece of team bonding afterwards.
Yeah. Well, we might get into that on another episode.
That's an episode in itself.
Yeah.
The aftermath. And then, I can still see, but we talk about team bonding and bonding exercises. How good was that? I can still see in my mind's eye Neil McDonald, the assistant manager, on this. It looked like a World War One aircraft that they were expecting us to fly into Croatia on. And this is the assistant manager pushing luggage around in the luggage hold so that the thing could take off. And he was like, nobody's allowed to sit near the front, everybody's at the back. And we're coming into landing, everybody near the front.
It was a shit show, wasn't it?
It was a shambles. It was an absolute shambles. But at the same time, it was brilliant because we were all sort of, once we'd got over the fear for our lives, we were like laughing about it and all the rest of it. And then Big Sam did Big Sam things, which was, there's no fucking way we're flying back on that. and the next day, a private jet appeared. It was, and that was, and then everybody went, "We love Big." Everybody started wearing the "We Love Big Sam" t-shirts, and then everybody was together, and we loved it, and all the rest of it. So that was that pre-season. Right, boxed it off. Pre-season, we've cracked it. We know what we're doing now. We'll do that. We'll do the same next year. And we'll tweak one or two things which perhaps didn't work quite so well, and you evolve and new ideas come along. But by and large, that's the structure that we want to follow. And then the club come to us and say, "Yeah, we've been invited to a tournament in Australia." Sorry, did you say Austria? You said Austria, didn't you? No, Australia. Why? Why are we going there? When are we going to become suddenly the most popular Premier League team in Australia? And I think we got sponsorship money to go. We got paid to go.
Go on, how much do you reckon?
I don't reckon it was that much. I don't reckon it was. I don't know.
A couple of million or less?
No. Nothing like. Nowhere near. There was us. There was Rangers. There was AEK Athens.
Yeah.
And there was Sydney FC.
Okay.
And viewers are welcome to look at this on Wikipedia. I'm sure it's on there, but it was supposed to be a tournament to driven by Sydney FC, I think it was, or I think it was supposed to be a 5-year thing. It lasted 1 year, but we ruined it for everybody. We broke it. Right, great trip from a social point of view. Disaster from the amount of training, the amount of work, the amount of contact time that we could get with players, and at that time it's winter in Australia, so it's wet and windy, and it wasn't particularly pleasant. So I think
just give us an idea of what the jet lag will actually do to a player. The travel, how far does that set them back, or not allow them to train at the full tilt?
The science behind it is all based around the circadian rhythm, and the circadian rhythm is the internal sort of biological clock of the body. So it dictates everything that you do. It dictates your energy, your mood. It controls your fluctuations throughout the day of different hormones. So, for example, in the sort of hour before you wake up, your body will naturally start adjusting its temperature, raising the temperature, and secreting cortisol to wake you up. Now, that happens at a particular time. That's why we always encourage players to, even on days off, go to bed and wake up at the same time, because your circadian rhythm is very, very sensitive, and it likes to be regular. It thrives on consistency. When you basically transplant a player from one time zone into another, it takes as a rule of thumb, it takes 1 day for each hour of time zone passed. Okay, for the body to adapt.
So what were you in Australia? What was your time difference? 10 hours?
Yeah, so effectively, you're supposed to maximize performance. You go out 10 days earlier, start playing, which never
Brilliant.
going to happen. And we managed that. So the teams have tried tour time. We're going to go on tour time. We'll stay on UK time because we're only going to be here for a short period of time, and it never works. There's no way of it working. And how did you? We were both on a tour with Aston Villa to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
How did you feel as a player?
Knackered, just tired all the time, absolutely shattered. I remember waking up at like, I don't know, 2, 3 in the morning, wide awake, and then you're going at 7 o'clock in the morning, right? You're running now, and then you're fine for that session, but then you get to midday and you're going, oh, you got another session now, and you're like, absolutely no chance. I'm dead on my feet. There's nothing in the tank at all.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, but I remember when I was at Liverpool, we went to Japan for the Club World Cup, and we had 2 games out there. And the idea was that we stayed on English time as much as we could. So this was brilliant. We got off the plane and we were all given sunglasses to wear, dark sunglasses, to try and stay in on UK time. So when it was like walked out in the sun, it was like, no, we're trying to stay dark. Everyone was up at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, wide awake, and I was rooming with Scott Carson. And I just remember thinking, like, this is a nightmare for both of us. Scott's brilliant, absolutely hilarious.
Cumbrian legend, by the way. Cumbrian legend.
Yeah, bouncing around the room at 2, 3 in the morning, like wired. And you're like, so I remember we went for a walk, and we had this shopping mall attached to our hotel that you could walk through, even though it was closed. And someone spotted us at something like 5 o'clock in the morning because the whole team were in the shopping mall pretty much. And it just got round, and suddenly there was thousands of fans in this shopping mall or outside it, and we all had to get back in the hotel because it was like, but it was ridiculous. I just remember thinking, like, what is going on? We need to get on the time as quick as possible. It was a nightmare.
Well, the difficulty with that, and I guess listening to your story, the science behind it is quite sound. The circadian rhythm is powerfully responsive to sunlight. So one of the things that we tell the players to do as soon as they wake up is to get as much natural sunlight into their eyes as possible. So go outside, don't wear your sunglasses early in the morning, because that recalibrates the circadian rhythm for you to go to bed at night. And how your body navigates its way through the day is dictated by that. So if we want players to, if we're exposing players to the loads and the type of training that we want them to complete during pre-season, we want them to come energized, we want them to come motivated, we want them to come physically and mentally prepared to engage in a fairly extensive and extreme session. How can we be expected to do that when biologically it's 3 o'clock in the morning for them, but also specifically thinking about the Far East in terms of the heat and the humidity? If you're on tour time, sometimes you say, right, we're going to run at this time because on tour time, this is the best time of day for us to be running. And it's the worst time of the day in the local time because it's roasting hot and it's as humid as hell and players just can't do it. So navigating that is difficulty. Now, the point I was trying to make earlier with, I get it if you've got a big team who have got global reach, they may be sponsored by, they may be going to a venue based on their shirt sponsor, and they give a lot of money and all the rest of it. And so it's more than just building the fan base and all that. There are other, and I get all that, but I think it is counterintuitive when pre-season sets you up for the season that you're going to have, when pre-season is your opportunity to prepare players, especially new signings and new managers going into teams, to really bed down their way of playing is an important one. How can you do that when you don't have the time and players are disappearing off for sponsorship and all this, and you don't have that contact time with the players because you're traveling here, there, and everywhere? First and foremost, how much is one place in the Premier League worth? Is it 2.2 million? Is it per place?
Roughly.
Right. So, how much money you generated if you are a lower ranked Premier League team? Below that top six. If you were a lower ranked Premier League team, surely it's more financially
Beneficial.
lucrative. If we're talking about, right, finance is driving the decision behind these tours. If we're talking about finance, and I've had this conversation and with a commercial director where I said, if we finish one place higher in the Premier League than we did last year, then we've got 2.2 million
Extra.
pounds extra coming in. Is this tour going to give us that? And the answer is no. His answer, his question to me was, can you guarantee me that we will finish higher? Well, of course you can't, because there's so many other factors that go into that. They generally even themselves out over the season, but refereeing decisions or whatever it might be.
Yes.
But I just think if you are a team, you've got to try and put yourself. If I'm a fan of one of these teams, I want my team to be as successful as possible. So I want my team to be doing the things that are going to make them successful or put them in a position to be as successful as possible. That's the most important thing to me. So when we look at recent pre-seasons and tours, and then we look then at subsequent final, did they qualify for the Champions League? Where did they finish in the league? What was their performance like through the season? Did they fall below expected standards? Did they then maybe move a manager on because of that? How much of that can be traced back to the disruption that they experienced by going on these commercially driven pre-season tours?
Let's talk about the first day of pre-season, and this is a day that I never really look forward to because I found it quite boring. And it is the testing day. So a couple of things I've got written down here are blood tests, and then I've got body fats, weights, dentist, podiatrist. Is that about right, roughly? And maybe a couple of other things?
Yeah, I think certainly in when you and I were working together both at Blackburn and Aston Villa, that would pretty much encompass it. Blood tests, what we're looking for from blood tests. Me as a fitness coach, I'm really looking for two things. I'm looking at your zinc levels and I'm looking at your magnesium levels, and to a certain degree your vitamin D levels as well, because zinc is hugely implicated in testosterone production. Testosterone, the male hormone, has huge significance to your recovery from the muscle damage that you will be experiencing during the pre-season period. So I'm interested in your zinc levels as to manipulate perhaps a supplement or your nutrition. Magnesium is one of the most important supplements that we can have. We're all magnesium deficient. Magnesium is implicated in every energy transfer reaction in your body, and it's implicated in your sleep. Footballers don't sleep as well as the general population. One of the reasons of that is magnesium deficiency.
And I think this is where, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but the game's developed. I think that information is more involved in discussions in the day-to-day because your staff is bigger. Whereas if you go back to when we were at Villa or Blackburn together, yours would have pretty much just been you and maybe the medical staff. So you're trying to get through players quite quickly, whereas now there might be 10 staff, 15 staff for everyone.
Since that time, you've seen this evolution in from a fitness coach working in isolation to entire performance departments where you've got specialized roles of strength and conditioning coaches. and injury prevention specialists and rehab coaches.
Yeah.
And part of that has been because, we've seen how the physical component of the game has evolved and increased. Part of that has been driven by technology. So we have, back in 2002, we had heart rate belts, which was kind of the limit of our monitoring of players.
Yeah.
And those were seen as pretty cutting edge at the time. Now we've got an incredible array of technologies which measure performance all the time of players, and those technologies need staff to drive them. So that's been part of it as well.
Yeah.
But going back to the testing, you would come in on day one and go through the testing regime, and you'd be pretty much done in 2 hours. Nowadays, testing can take 2 days, partly because of those technological developments that I mentioned. We are able to measure components of performance that we weren't able to measure 5, 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And those give us an insight into performance levels, which allow us to make decisions with individual players. One test might make the difference for one player
Yeah.
within a squad of 25 players. So that's why there's more and more tests coming on stream all the time.
I think the one that I quite liked was podiatrist. I always like getting my feet done and my feet getting looked at, because essentially they're your tools. And if you've got blisters, if you've got ingrowing toenails, if you've got certain issues with your feet, or you need orthotics or something like that, that can, well, you can give us a little bit more as to why you'd wear an orthotic. But
Yeah. So
that was,
how? I mean,
that was a little bit new to me when I was coming in.
right. So your feet are the feet are a footballer's tools, aren't they? It's and maintaining the health, but also from a performance point of view, how the foot interacts with the ground, and how the foot is fitting within a boot. The majority of players that we work with at our level in the Premier League would have boot deals, that have boot suppliers, or a preferred boot that they would use. Sometimes that boot wasn't appropriate to the shape of that player's foot. So we're trying to maximize, from a performance point of view, how we talk about force and strength and power, but how that force, strength, and power is being transferred into the ground, and the ground reaction forces related to that are really, really important to prevent a power leak or those forces being dissipated, if you like. So the podiatrist, and it's a very specialized area, would make recommendations. I've had an experience of a player being analysed by a podiatrist and been given inserts, and not wanting to use them, but they were kind of produced on them. So in terms of that, when we made recommendations based on the tests that we did with you on day one, specifically, look, podiatry is a great example, and they would give you these inserts.
Yeah.
How open were you to, at that time, how open were you to using them?
Well, I think when you grow up as a kid, you think, well, naturally, I've got my way to the top. So why do I need to change all these things? But then when I look back on it now, I bought into it because I had 2 hernia operations at Liverpool, because effectively my feet and my knees dipped in.
Yeah.
So I was always putting pressure on my groins, and I had a double hernia up. And when I had my hernia up, and I went to a lady in Munich called Mushevek, and she said to me, you need to get inner soles because you need to change. So when I went back to Liverpool, I had to learn to basically run again and wear inner soles and push my knees outwards. So I spent 2 weeks basically trying to retrain my body and my muscles to run outwards, to stop that pressure going on my groins. So that to me was new. However, when I look back on it now, and we hear it so much in the media, in different types of sports, it's about the 1% marginal gains. And what you're talking about here on day one is making sure that you're getting them 1% marginal gains, because they can attribute to so much going forward. And when you're talking there about the right footwear, the right things to push off, people just think players turn up and it's just a natural ability. It is to a certain degree, but you've got to put other things in place to help you get even further along.
Absolutely. And when we're talking about, the value of players and pushing performance levels and the rewards that are available, those 1% across a 25-man squad aggregate into quite big things. How did you feel then going from doing a pre-season where you were probably an established player, and then you knew what was coming, you had a good idea of what the work was going to be expected of you, to then move into a new club and having little idea? How did that feel for you in terms of the way you prepared yourself in the off season, if there was a move happening in the off season, or there was a move potentially in the pipeline for you,
Yeah.
versus when you were at a settled club? How did you navigate yourself through the off season in those two different scenarios?
Yeah, I think if you know you're moving club, I think you're going back as fit as you can, ready to go into a new club. But even if you're not going to that new club straight away and you have to go back and do pre-season, you want to make sure you're at your best levels, because you're getting judged by everyone as soon as you walk through the door, not just the staff, but the players as well, because the players are going, well, we know a little bit about him, but what's he like? What is his levels going to be? So I think that's quite important. I think there's an element of when you're at a club and you know the staff like you and you're staying at that club, you can be a little bit more, not lazy, but you know that you're not getting judged as much because they've already bought you or you're already at the club and they know your capabilities. So it's a little bit more relaxed when you do that. I as I got older, the more probably at the start, I was a bit more not looking forward to preseason. I probably was a little bit lazy. I think there was an element where when I first started out, you'd have 6 weeks off and you'd do nothing. That was what preseason was for. It was to be lazy. It was to eat what you wanted, drink what you wanted. Almost like you see Ricky Hatton when he used to fight, or Paddy the Baddy when he fights now, is like they fluctuate massively. They're up and down. Whereas now you can't do that. Towards the end of my career, it was very much make sure that you're doing your programs in the off season, making sure that you're coming back at a decent level of fitness. But I always felt that I wanted to start a little bit behind people. And the reason being was I wanted to feel like I got somewhere in preseason and that there was an achievable goal. So if you look at, we'll mention them because they're putting a lot of things out on social media at the moment. But you look at Stat Sport, who do the GPS for your vests.
Yeah.
They're putting out what all clubs are doing now on the first day or the first run. That is a test of their endurance and where they're actually at. So I always wanted to be almost negative on that. And then when I got retested in 4 weeks, I always thought, well, psychologically, I'm going to be better because I know I'm going to be better at that. So that was something that I always tried to achieve, and it worked quite well for me in preseason. I always thought I was quite good in preseason and did well at it. But
your fitness coach might have different opinions.
Have you not got the stats up with you? I was good. I was all right in preseason.
You were good.
Quite liked it.
Where I think you were good, and I don't want this to be a kind of, oh, you were great, no, you were great, no, you were great, no, you were great, was in, we talked about new players coming in and in finding out what the club stands for and what our standards are.
Yeah.
As a fitness coach, you set certain objectives, but it's up to the players to fulfill those objectives,
Of course it is,
and what you need is highly motivated players who are showing leadership to other players who perhaps don't have that same level of motivation for pre-season.
Yeah.
There are players who respond really well to running. There are players who don't and don't like it, and have a very, very, very hard time with the running mentally as much as anything. And also the new players coming in, you know, young players, perhaps coming from abroad where the culture is very different, where the language is very different. But I, as a fitness coach, certainly looked very, very closely at the senior players and the leadership group within the senior players
Yeah.
to really help me pull some of those players along.
Do you know what I was when I was at Liverpool, sort of, what would I have been, 17, 18? I was awful at running, could not run, hated running, did not like it at all, didn't want to do it. And I went to Coventry on loan, and we had a Scottish fitness coach, and he said to me, "You've got to learn to love running." And I remember him saying it. But the other thing that really did me in pre-season, I never forget it. I went for my medical at Coventry, and I was sat on the treatment table, and the doctor turned round to me, and he literally grabbed me belly, and he went, "About a stone." And I went, "What?" And he went, "You need to lose about a stone." And I was like, "You're kidding, aren't you?" And he was like, "No, you're too fat. You need to lose weight here around your belly." He said, "You can't run if you're carrying that." And I was like 18, I was 19 at the time, going on 20. And I remember thinking, this is interesting. But the same time we signed Michael Doyle, who had a brilliant career at both Coventry, Sheffield United, Portsmouth. He was ridiculously fit. And I remember thinking to myself, if I want to play in this team, I need to get fitter than him or be at his level at least. And I learned so much from him as to the mentality of running. And it wasn't, and that was, like you say there, leadership. But he was the same age as me. I think he might have been younger than me. And I remember thinking, my God, this is like how fit you've got to be. And that was my first real insight into a pre-season where I thought, you've got to get fit. You've got to get fitter, and you cannot carry weight. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me, was the doctor embarrassing me, grabbing me belly and going, "Too fat, too heavy."
Probably get done for bullying nowadays.
Yeah, possibly, but he was right.
You talk about pre-season memories. One of mine, as a young fitness coach, I started out at Newcastle United Academy, but because we had, in those days, there was a small sort of performance staff. So I would help out with the pre-season with the first team, which was an incredible honour.
So go on then. Who was in the first team for Newcastle then?
Well, the story is like Gary Speed owned pre-season, and I was just a young fitness coach, just helping out. So we would split. I remember this session distinctly. We would split the group, where they'd have one group in the gym doing their injury prevention work, and the other group would be outside doing running. And it was on a grass track, and we're doing repeat 1,000 meters, and it was 2004. So it was Gary Speed's last pre-season with Newcastle before he moved to Bolton.
Yeah.
But it was what would he be then, 33, 34-year-old Gary Speed and an 18-year-old James Milner. And it was like watching, and also mention Jermaine Genius as well.
Yeah.
And watching those three going at it in the run, where it became really competitive, because you had the 18-year-old James Milner, "I'm going to show people what I'm about here." And I think he'd probably be 32, 33 then, Gary Speed, showing, I'm still the boss here. And
Really?
of pre-season, it was like, mate, it was like watching Seb Coe and Steve Ovett. I'd have paid money to watch it, just watching them running. It was, and that as a young fitness coach, leaving a mark on me in terms of what it takes to prepare through pre-season.
What was it though? Was it mentality, or was it a natural
mentality?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. You've got to have that. If you haven't got that natural sort of tolerance to those kind of training sessions and that type of training, then all the will and motivation in the world, you're not going to be able to do it physically. I'd love to be the Olympic 100-meter champion, but I'm never going to do it. So, but allied to that mentality, which drove those performance levels of those individuals higher, and they drove each other on. They drove themselves on massively, but they drove each other on, and it was like watching the competitive nature, and you think, unbelievable watching these two here, unbelievable watching them.
Do the managers leave you to it for a certain period of time, or are the managers that want in on everything and want to have a say in what goes on from the off?
Yeah, I think there's both. I mean, I started in 2002, Newcastle United. I was the academy fitness coach, but because there were only two fitness coaches at the club at the time, in the pre-season period, I would often assist with the first team, which was brilliant. And the manager then was Sir Bobby Robson, who was, I mean, what a place to start your career as a young fitness coach, just absorbing that the energy and all of the things that we know about him as but what was a bit of an eye-opener was he was really advanced in terms of he just let the fitness coach get on with his job. And I wonder how much of that was he'd managed in Europe for a period of time at PSV after he'd been England manager for a period. He went to PSV, didn't he? And he went to Portugal, and he was at Barcelona, and he'd seen these different influences of, the continental way of doing things, and how much of that influenced him then to bring that back to Newcastle United. And it was very much, you're the experts, you get on with it.
Music to your ears.
Fitness coaches' dreams. You've got certain players are fitness coaches' dreams, and certain managers are as well. Brilliant. Probably the best, certainly that I've worked with as a staff, and we've both worked with him, was Big Sam Allardyce, who always reiterated the fact that you are here because you're the best person for the job, but you were left in no uncertain terms. In no doubt whatsoever, he would say in no uncertain terms, if I find somebody better, you will be out of the door. So you better make sure that you're progressing. And his expectation for you as a staff member was that you were constantly developing and evolving and bringing new ideas and looking at things in a different way and driving performance that way. And he would challenge you, and he would say, like, what have we done? What have we got new this pre-season? What's your new recovery supplement? Why are what are we doing differently? And you'd better have the answers. And as you got to learn how Sam worked, you got the answers ready before he asked the questions.
Yeah,
we're doing this.
Because you knew they were coming.
You expected them, and that created an environment in which the culture was very progressive, and Sam was massively ahead of his time. I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves in the behind the scenes. People say, yeah, he was into sports science and he was into stats, and people don't. He was looking at stats in a particular way, which was so advanced for that time. It was incredible. But he also married that with a little bit more of the old school stuff in terms of team bonding and team preparation, and it really was a meeting of two worlds, and he got that balance right perfectly.
I remember we had a young lad at Leeds, Matty Pears, who was a brilliant fitness coach. He was young, enthusiastic, and he was very much one of, I'm in this with you. I'm going to do the pre-season with you, because I always looked at a fitness coach and thought, if he can do it, we can do it. And he was a fit lad. He does Ironman, he does triathlons and things like that. And when he took his top off, I looked and thought, you look the part, mate. You are shredded to death. And I'd done a couple of pre-seasons with him in Austria, in Italy, and my God, they were tough, really tough. But the tougher they were, the better they were. I enjoyed them more. I enjoyed the element of that week to 2 week period of trying to get yourself as fit as possible. I loved, do you know when you go in and you do a test on the first day or the second day, whatever it might be, and 3 weeks down the line, it's like, we're doing that test again. And I think, I can't wait to beat this, because I know I'm fitter and stronger. I love that element of it. Absolutely loved it. And then I remember when I was I went to Burton towards the end of my career, which was a very interesting pre-season. It was proper old school. And Nigel Clough was away on holiday. He was in America because his daughter had done a GCSE, so he hadn't been able to take her on holiday. She finished the GCSEs, went away to Florida, and we had 2 weeks at the beginning of pre-season where the assistant manager and the fitness coach and the physio took training, but it was laps, or it was track training, it was running through parks, it was doing sprints up hills in parks. We did a almost like a Tough Mudder, where we did this event in Nottingham where we all raced against each other, and we were swimming through swamps, we were jumping into puddles and everything. And I absolutely loved it. And that was my last season as a pro. And that was arguably one of the most enjoyable pre-seasons. Things didn't go well after that, but I think I threw everything into that pre-season. And strangely, I actually was one of the fittest players in pre-season because I enjoyed every single day. What is the structure of a good pre-season? What are you looking to achieve in a good pre-season?
Yeah, I mean, you probably didn't realize it, but there is a science and a thought process behind it. It's not just, if you what is the overarching goal of the pre-season period? For me, it's to increase the ability of the players to cope with the physical demands of the game. And so your starting point is, well, what is the physical demand of the game? We're looking at players now, they're covering 12 to 13K a game on average. Some will do more, some will do less. Depends on position. You're doing 1,200 meters of high speed running. You're doing 300 to 500 meters of sprint. So I need to prepare players who are physically capable of doing that. But when players are running, they're running to do something. There's something that at the end of it, and the thing at the end of it is a technical skill action. So if you're a striker, when you're sprinting, yes, you might be sprinting to make space, but by and large, you're sprinting to get a shot on goal, or to get yourself into a goal scoring position where somebody can find you, and you've got a goal scoring opportunity. So there's a technical component which is attached to the physical component. So for me, because of that, I like to get the balls out on day one.
Yeah.
I think there's the way that I kind of manage the first part of pre-season, what I call the work capacity stage, and what I mean by that is my goals, my aims, my objectives are to increase the number of sprints that players are capable of doing, and to increase the distances that they're covering at high intensity, to increase the number of times they're getting on the ball, and because I think the most decisive moments in a game are associated with high intensity actions. The more high intensity actions my players are capable of producing, then the more they're going to dominate the opposition, and the more games we're going to win. So, and that starts from day one. And the starting point for that is endurance. We talk about building the aerobic base. How quickly can you recover from these periods of maximal intensity in the game, and be able to, if at the end of the I can take the players and, right, we're going to do 10 high speed runs, but if at the end of the 10th they've all got their hands on the knees and or lying on the ground, they're not going to be able to influence the game there. So for me, we've got to integrate the balls. And the way I do it, if you cast your mind back to some of the pre-seasons you did with me, I liked to split the group into two. One group would do a dribble track with the ball at the feet, which was, if you remember, I wanted to address straight away that directional change. Football is a multi-directional sport. It's a multi-speed sport. So I wanted to address that and expose players to the muscular forces and the metabolic stressing the energy systems to support those movements. I would supplement that with tempo running, so we are doing running without the ball. The other half would be doing a possession. and we would manipulate the area size and the rules of the possession and the numbers according to certain aims and objectives and training targets, because you're all wearing a GPS unit.
Okay, so what we've done here is we've tried to cover all bases on preseason, but preseason's a big thing. It's a long process. So what we've done is we've covered the start of preseason, if you like, and we've realised that we're going to talk for quite a while on this. So we're going to make this a 2-part episode. So that is the end of part 1, and join us for part 2.